And so I came to the place to where even as a Christian minister, I think I would have called myself a progressive minister, because I came to the point where I recognized that certain things in scriptures, in holy books, in all of the holy books, whether it's Islam, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Christianity and the others, are manipulative tools used to control, the masses. And that's where that whole opiate, of the masses come from, because people, especially if they're born generations and generations into that belief, the assumption is there from the following generations that this is simply true, and I'm not going to question it. And that is a place of religion, and that is a place that I believe if I hadn't become an atheist first, that's where I'd still be. But I spent years transitioning over into this awake, still spiritual, still believing, but not believing a lot of any of the things that alienate other folks, that justify me being okay and them not, okay? if there is an entity, if there is a deity that created all, and then there's a love from that deity for all of its children, regardless of how we may have determined that the deity accepts us and not them, okay? And so I think it's very important for one's prosperity, because I do believe you reap what you sow. I do believe how you treat others, it comes back to you. Let me give you sort of, it's not really an abstract, but sort of maybe a little off the course a little bit, but an example of what I'm talking about. When my son was coming up in high school, especially around the 11th and 12th grade, he always worked. My daughter worked too. I don't know where they got that from, because I was never trying to work while I was in school. But anyway, he was working at a restaurant called Max and Irma's. It was a restaurant, and he was a server. And he's a real good young man, good personality, likes people, people like him. He does very well, now in the business world. But that's how he was always. And me, as far as me, I'm a big tipper when I go to restaurants. I mean a real big tipper. I mean, I see all these people on the internet talking about, not tipping if it's a carry out or if they don't have. Man, I'm a big tipper. If it's a carry out, I'm a big tipper. If I have a bad server, I'm still a big tipper, because I'm hoping that they're going to say, wow, I was a bad server, and they still gave me a big tip, and maybe it might affect them. Big tipper. Man, I've been at some places where I've tipped. My tip was larger than the meal cost, simply because I recognized this server needed help. And that's the way I've always lived. That's the way I've always. If I had the money, I'd tip large, okay? And but what interesting is, he'd be calling me or talking to me or texting me or something and say, Dad, you wouldn't believe all the tips I'm getting. I'm getting way more tips than anybody else that I'm working with. He was amazed. He didn't know why, but he was just telling me. He was thrilled about it. And in my mind, in my heart, and I didn't even mention to him, was that the tips that I am imparting into other folks' children's lives, my son is reaping the benefit, because he is my child and he is a server, in another land, in another city. So what I learned early on was that it's very important to treat people very special, and you are going to be recipients on that same level of treatment that you're giving out. So as I was giving big tips to all these servers who were waiting on me in these restaurants, my son was reaping big tips in another city as a server to other people. So it's very important. So we recognize then, I want to use that to correlate to our lives as we're wondering why we're not being as successful as we would like to be. We're wondering why we're not as prosperous as we need to be. And you ask yourself then, how am I responding to other people? How am I treating them? Man, we really, see, now this is what I'm sharing with you is kind of hard to duplicate. But you can try to start in your own kind of way, what you can do. Like, in my life, I spent 17 years talking to those kids at juvenile detention. And man, I wouldn't go in there just to say something. Man, I would spend all week trying to prepare, trying to get ready, trying to give them some hope, trying to give them some love, trying to give them some insight, some wisdom, and maybe a different perspective on how to look at things so they can be well. And everything that I could think of that they needed in their lives, I would give them. And you know, in retrospect now, I believe that 17 years, I received more out of those 17 years than I gave. And let me explain why. So every day when I'd go there, I'd speak to maybe 40 or 50 kids or so in a gymnasium. And as I shared, I would give them everything that I could from the depths of me to help them be well, to ensure their wellness, to give them a different way of viewing things, and love and peace of mind and happiness and contentment and anything you could think of. That's what I was doing for 17 years. But think of this. Okay, I calculated halfway through that 17 years that I had spoken to over 9,000 kids. Okay, that was on the halfway through point. Now think about this. There's one of me, and I've sowed into the lives positivity, goodness, happiness, love, help, peace of mind, hope, all the good things you can imagine into the lives of 9,000 kids. Now imagine if the concept of reaping and sowing is true. There's only one of me sowing into 9,000 lives. What do you think I'm reaping back? Man, I've lived through the same type situations in life that everybody else has. You know, folks look at my life now and they say, man, you know, you're living large, you got this and you got that and all this stuff. And sometimes people think, man, I'd like to be that way. Or sometimes people might have an attitude with me about it, telling me, you just don't understand. But what I'm sharing with you, it wasn't always like this. But you do reap what you sow. And oftentimes what we're sowing is negativity. I mean, go on the internet, look into politics. Everybody's mad at each other. So you got two political parties primarily. One of them is like really harsh to everybody, you know, being mean and harsh and unsympathetic and all. What do you think they're reaping back? But then you got the other party, they're all mad at this party and they're all just angry and vitriolic to this party. So they're really doing the same thing, and both parties are feeling they're justified by their attitudes. But what I'm saying is, what do you think they're reaping back? They're all reaping negativity. And yet if you notice the stock market, I mean, you can blame it on whoever you want, but the reality is what reaping and sowing is true. If what goes around does actually come around, you know, we all have a part in this, and we have to make sure that we are doing our part to be good. So I'm suggesting, I guess, in the nutshell, that the journey to becoming awake is being good. It's being intentionally good, being intentionally kind, being intentionally accepting, and recognizing that everyone isn't going to be and to think like you, but they're just as much human, just as much deserving as you are. And I'm not even taking a side, like as far as the sexual orientation and all that. I'm not taking a side because what I see here often is both sides are not accepting of the other. We all have different opinions. It's not the opinion on what we believe is right and wrong. How do we respond to people who don't agree with us? That's the issue. So you got these folks over here saying, you know, I don't believe in the trans thing, and you shouldn't, you know, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and just being all harsh and everything. But then you got the folks over here being all harsh to these guys, trying to insist that you recognize me for what I am. And so there's negativity going on everywhere. And each side feels they're justified in their negativity. And I'm saying you're justified in having an opinion on what is right or wrong, what is biological or not biological, what is spiritual, what is not spiritual. You know, what is, you know, we all have our opinions. The opinions are not the issue. The issue is how are we responding to each other, okay? And it's simply that. And I'm saying that is the journey. See, there are people that believe they're awake or believe they're woke just because they embrace this particular ideology. But no, your awakeness or your awoke is how you're responding to people you disagree with, and how you're responding to people who disagree with you.